Welcome to the Anthony and Todd Show. For Trevor Abley, I'm Vincent Thomas Short. Today we got a extra special episode with a interview from Bristol lo-fi band Oro Swimming Hour. We are going to be talking to the members Oliver Wilde and Nicholas Stevenson about their new album Pteradactyl. They're also going to be talking about some interesting stories involving haunted mansions, children's books, and also some obscure British kids television show. Without any further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Trevor, and here's our interview with Oro Swimming Hour.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Anthony and Todd Show. We're here with episode 3. Today we're talking to the UK duo Oro Swimming Hour. I'm here with Oliver Wilde.
Hey.
And Nicholas Stevenson.
Hello, thanks for having us.
Thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate you. Before we get started, Oliver, you said Nick had a weird accent. Can you explain that?
Well, I think Nick might have been born in multiple places at once.
I see.
And grew up in multiple places at once. I think that's factual.
Yeah,
I see.
I think that's a pretty accurate explanation.
I see.
Yeah, my mum is American, and but I grew up in a place called the Seychelles for a few years, which is like a island chain in the Indian Ocean. So even though I've lived in the UK most of my life, I spent too much time just listening to my mum's American accent, and now my voice is weird, so there you go.
That's what happens when it happens, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So, to kick things off, how did you guys first get into making music?
Well, weirdly, like, Oro Swimming Hour is a sort of a reflection of the very earliest moments in which you begin to make music, in the sense that when you're, like when you're a kid, you get your little cassette recorder and you record silly songs with your siblings or whatever. And I think that's how we both started out. Just like, very ill-conceived of the moment, just like recording funny little songs. And that's how... I'm sorry, I'm waffling.
No, I agree with that, though. I think I have some tape recordings from when I was like 3 or 4 years old or something, and I was just throwing out tunes about giraffes and dogs, and they're great. I really love them. There's no self-consciousness. It's just, whatever's coming through you, and I think we really wanted to get back to that in our Oro Swimming Hour. I mean, we've been making music together in various incarnations for a long time, and I think when Oro Swimming Hour happened, we wanted to just make stuff as friends and not really put any expectation on it that it was going to be amazing, or we just wanted to kind of let stuff happen and really enjoy making music together like a kid would. And we did use cassette players and sort of simple recording techniques. We weren't going to like throw the whole production thing at it.
How do you feel like that has an effect on your songwriting process now? Do you feel like you try to channel that like inner child, or do you think that sometimes you try too hard?
I think this newest album we had to really think differently about it, because we've made it over lockdown. Normally we'd get together in person and we'd maybe go back through some songs we had lying around, and we'd write lyrics together, like back and forth. And I think being in each other's company and having maybe a time limit on, I'm gonna have to go home in like a couple of hours, so we need to finish these 4 tracks or whatever, kind of meant we couldn't be too self-conscious, and we just wouldn't overthink anything. And then now we've had to do stuff over the internet, where suddenly we do have all this time and we can fuss over things, but I think we've managed to keep that kind of spirit of fun and childishness. But it is very easy to try too hard, I think, or let that self-consciousness creep back in.
Yeah, it's like the more you learn how to make music, the more of the kind of mystery and magic of it you kind of reveal. And it's actually such an important part of like learning about what you enjoy about making music in those very early moments of, pure discovery, and you're like indulging this curiosity, and years later you learn so much about it that you have you can have this tendency to kind of overthink things. And yeah, like Oro Swimming Hour is meant to be like an absence of that. Just make it as easy as possible.
Did you guys both have musical families, musical pasts, aside from just kind of recording silly songs?
Yeah, my drummer was in my dad was in a
Easily confused.
It's just simple word swapping them around. Makes sense to me. My dad was a drummer in a punk band called Creepy Howard.
And my dad had a band in the 70s. It sounded a bit like the sort of Bonzo Dog Doodah band kind of thing. And they were called Martha the Magician.
Oh,
it was good.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Very cool. I like that name a lot. So you mentioned when we were talking about, Dayton, Ohio, Guided by Voices is one of your big influences. What are some of your other influences?
Well, I think just like any artists that use primitive recording techniques, like Daniel Johnston's obviously like a big influence. Mm-hmm. He's a real sort of celebrator of simplicity, and so is Oro Swimming Hour. But I guess what we would now consider as like outsider artists, because now lo-fi is like a very accepted, almost like it's become a genre more than like a recording technique. But yeah, just like that early Modest Mouse and early Nutrimilk Hotel, that kind of stuff, just some peeps and their cassette recorder,
Oliver, you I think it's your Instagram bio that says you're an ex-concierge for a haunted...
it was the album description for Lost.
That's what it was.
On the vinyl website.
It says you're an ex-concierge for a haunted mansion. Can you elaborate?
Well, near where my mum lives, there's this it's a really old manor house. I think it's medieval, or it might be Tudor. I think it's Tudor, actually. I know that Henry VIII lived there at one point.
Oh, wow.
But it's fiercely haunted. And so I got a job as the concierge there, and it was cool. I got to like wear a suit and just greet guests as they came in, and it was kind of like a perfect split between just like old people who wanted to get away into the countryside, and then the other half were all like ghost hunters. And this won't get me in trouble, but I used to just make up ghost stories to almost every new person that came through the door. And I'd be like, no, listen here, let me give you the scoop. Yeah, no, there's this one stair set. If you go there at midnight and turn around 100 times and say 3 Hail Marys, then you'll see the devil, I assure you. But they were like deadly serious about it. They had all the equipment, and there was, in fact, I think it might have been an American show that came and stayed with us for a bit, and they had like full on. I mean, I don't know what the equipment does, but like all these amazing little gadgets, and they were walking around the hallways at night, and I was like, yeah, no, there's a good spot down there where the ghost always turns up. See, another one I said was like, there was this in the room that is supposedly haunted, there's like a chandelier, and I said, go in, and at midnight you'll notice that all the candles point inwards.
What does that even mean?
Exactly. And then what would be amazing is like in the morning they'd come down and I'd be there, in my suit, ready to greet them, saying, how was your stay, how was your sleep, and they'd tell me all their ghost stories, and I actually got some great ghost stories. It's so supposedly there was a midwife that lived nearby, and one night some guys turned up and they put a hood over her head and said, we've got to take you somewhere, but you can't know where you're going. But Littlecote House is like at the bottom of a valley, so they put the hood over her head and put her in like an old horse and cart or whatever, but she knew exactly where she was going from the way that the cart was going downhill. And they pulled up to Littlecote House, and there was a woman giving birth, and the midwife helped deliver the baby. And the moment, this is such a downer for like a music podcast, I'm so sorry, but like and they grabbed the baby and threw it on the fire. I know it's horrible, it's really horrible. So the baby's supposed to haunt the house, and actually I didn't ever see any ghost activity, I've got to say, but I worked with this guy called Mario, this Italian guy who ran the bar, and I came into work one day and everyone said that Mario's left. And I was like, what's the situation? And they said, well, apparently he was putting all the chairs up on the tables, you know how they do in bars when they close.
Sure.
And he looked out the window, the sort of windows that went onto this big life-size chessboard, which actually was quite scary at night time because they're like the size of humans. And he said he just saw a baby crawling across the floor and it was crying and looking at him. And he was like, I'm gonna vamoose if you don't mind. And he never came back. So someone's seeing stuff. Someone's seeing stuff.
It wasn't just like an excuse to like get off work.
I mean, it's like a good one. It's definitely a good one, an elaborate one.
Yeah, I wouldn't come back if I saw that. So the chessboard is just the icing on the cake, honestly.
Well, that's like one of the stories is that pieces on the chessboard would just like move by themselves, and it was also actually interestingly where the 101st Airborne, the Americans, stayed the night before they stormed the beach in Normandy. So supposedly, people can hear like marching and like parading around the site at night. I never heard that, but that's another one that people said. But yeah, my job was to like greet all the. So when the old people turn up, you just say, "Yeah, it's going to be really peaceful and lovely, and we got a nice swimming pool and everything." And then everyone else, you're like, "Oh yeah, God, you'd be lucky if you make the night." Honestly,
that's awesome.
Yeah, that's very awesome. Nick, you are a children's book illustrator, correct?
Correct. Yes.
How'd you get into that?
I studied illustration, and yeah, I mean, I think kind of similar to our music, you know, there's a kind of, and that interest in outsiders and sort of children's perspective on things, like, drawing is kind of just another way that comes out for me. But yeah, I've been kind of illustrating for the last 10 years or so, and there's a couple of books out. I mean, they're really different to what I do with Oro Swimming Hour. They're like non-fiction books about history and the origin of words, and they're, you know, very cheerful and colourful.
I see. Is that something that you wanted to do for a long time?
I think when I started out in illustration, I would have said I just wanted to do really badass album sleeves and violent comic books and weird stoner zine sort of things, probably. But yeah, no, I'm really glad to have done it. It's a really, really fun way to work, and you can have a lot of fun with kids. I think publishers are kind of taking a few more risks now, kind of with the way things look, and they're trying not to patronize kids too much. I think there's a lot of fun to be had. Kids are awesome, so.
Very good. Your Instagram bio also says that you make children's music, and we've talked kind of about the childlike wonder of your music with Oro Swimming Hour. Do you feel like you do make music for kids or from a kid's perspective?
Well, I think our music would go really well on things like Mr. Ben and the Magic Roundabout. You know? And I
actually don't know. I don't know what that is.
Those are two super duper English programs that were they were in the 60s, and the people that made these shows were all like on acid. So
okay.
If you haven't seen it, Mr. Ben and the Magic Roundabout, but you have to be like pretty blazed.
Yeah, well, I don't know if it was every episode of the Magic Roundabout or just the movies or something, but they were animated with little figurines, and the originals were French, and they sent it over to the UK, and an English guy did an English narration, but he didn't get a script or a translation for what was going on in the original ones, so he just had to look at all this quite kind of psychedelic animation, just decide what the heck was going on, and you could tell he was kind of exhausted with it, like, and then he's like, I don't know what we're doing now, like, it's just great. It's really good.
Yeah, I think what we mean by children's music is just simple and like a celebration of life. It's just like nice, happy melodies. There's no malice behind any of our music whatsoever. There's no complaining, or it's just it's supposed to tap into that. I think what we try and do almost when we're making it is like think like children, like just be as basic and uninformed as possible. But it's like if children's music was a genre, you think Disney and all that, singing along to
right
these, and actually some of the weird CGI children's programs they have now are pretty psychedelic and interesting. But the music, I think, like what Nick said, it's kind of like patronizing towards children, and I think children are a bit smarter than that, and some children want to engage with different stuff, and we're hopefully going to provide that.
Going back to lockdown, you said this entire album was made during lockdown, or a majority of it was. Did you learn anything new from the process of that? Anything about like the creation process of making music? Did you learn anything new about yourselves and how you guys operate from lockdown?
I think I've learned to have a positive mental attitude towards Facebook Messenger. I think that's pretty much all I've learned. But like normally Nick and I just kind of get together, we get some chicken and some drinks, and we just like sit there until it's done. And it usually takes about 4 days. Like the first 2 records, the first one definitely was like 4 days, 4 or 5 days. And there's like an immediacy about not doing retakes or anything like that, just being happy with, as soon as you finish the last word, you just record it and that's it. And there's a sense of spontaneity in that way. But obviously when you're emailing little tracks back and forth, you can probably spend more time overthinking it and over-analyzing it, which is against our sort of unwritten manifesto. So I think we've learned we probably won't do it the same way again, but it was also just like an interesting challenge.
In some ways, this is my favorite record, though.
Yeah, for sure.
And for me, it did feel really spontaneous. Like because the lockdown just made us sort of drop all our plans, and I don't know. It just kind of time started to behave a bit strangely, and I don't know. And we brought in more collaborators as well. So I would sort of do a little something and then pass it back to you online and kind of try and forget about it. And then we'd pass it to some of our friends as well, and we were all just kind of working out who could do something best, and it still had a kind of quickness to it that things were bouncing around. And because everyone was in lockdown, no one could go out, no one was busy, everyone was responding to us right away. It would be like, can you put a violin on this? And it would come back like 20 minutes later, and it was exciting that way, I think.
Yeah, it was like pass the parcel with each idea. Just pass it along, and then it comes back slightly differently, and you react to that and keep going, and then someone says it's done, and you go, okay, then it's done. Mm-hmm. It was great.
Did this album cycle start pre-lockdown, or was it completely during lockdown?
No, it was completely during lockdown. I mean, we probably wouldn't have made a third album if it hadn't been for lockdown. I mean, we would have done eventually, but I think it was just suddenly we had the time, and it just happened.
Yeah. It usually starts, like Nick will send me an idea, or I'll send him an idea, and then maybe 2 or 3 songs start to emerge, and then once the ball gets rolling, it's like, right, quickly, it's happening. That magic thing is happening. So it wasn't dependent necessarily on the lockdown, but the way we recorded it was obviously informed by it. But it kind of just like happened out of nowhere. Oh God!
What's happening in Bristol now?
I'm sorry, what was that?
If anyone wants an ice cream, the ice cream van's here.
That is the loudest ice cream truck I've ever heard.
That sounds like a church bell.
I know. He comes at exactly the same time every day, and I think there's like a law in Britain of how long you can play an ice cream van theme tune for. And that's quite short compared to how it usually is. And it's so loud, it's so distorted, and it's like he just blast. He doesn't have a concept of audio quality. He just wants to let everybody know.
Neither do we, to be fair.
No, and it works because now I'm thinking about an ice cream.
Do you ever buy from him?
Do you know what? I don't. It's I get my ice cream ready in the freezer when I want it.
I see.
I don't want to be
beauty
told.
Of being an adult, yeah.
I don't want to be told it's ice cream time.
I think it's funny you guys have a law against like sirens going, or ice cream sirens going off, because I swear I was at Trevor's like a couple weeks ago, or at his parents' house, and the ice cream truck man was blaring his music for a good like 15 minutes, and it seemed like he just got like lost in the neighborhood at some point. Yeah, it just kept on going.
I was just saying help. That was just a siren for help. It's like I'm lost.
Yeah, our ice cream trucks just play constantly. They never stop playing.
Oh. What kind of tunes do they use? Classic?
It's just
Turkey in a Straw. Just an old standard.
And that's it. And they just sometimes they'll blare hello, and it's really weird. It's just one word, hello, and then it'll just like restart the tune over and over again.
Oh, I thought you meant the Lionel Richie track.
Oh, no. I would buy every time.
That would be amazing.
No. I almost feel bad for the guy. I wonder if he can like hear the music inside the truck.
That would definitely make reading your PRS statement interesting.
Yes.
You got played at a cafe in Romania, but you also got paid an ice cream van in like Poland or whatever. 11 pence. Yeah, it's the wild, where I live here. It's like the Wild West. I'm sort of like, I don't want to show off the Wild West of where I live, but you get in it, so it's all good. You've had a scream and you've had the ice cream truck, so
Yeah.
God knows what's coming next.
We'll get back to the interview in just 1 second. I just want to take a moment to plug some of our social media. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook at Anthony and Todd. You can also find this on YouTube if you're listening in podcast form and you want to see a more visual form of it. You can go to youtube.com/The Anthony and Todd Show. If you want to find us on podcast streaming services, you can find us on Podbean, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Play Podcasts, and Spotify by searching The Anthony and Todd Show in your favorite podcast browser. You can support us monetarily on Patreon by going to patreon.com/The Anthony and Todd Show. We have some reward tiers that you might be interested in contributing to. If you're a fan of the show and you want to help support us monetarily, that is always welcome, but it's never required. You can always share the show to your friends, family, whoever. Just shout it in the middle of the street. Just shout the Anthony and Todd Show, and all is good. If you like us and you want to hear more from us, that's a good way of supporting us. If you don't want to support monetarily, you can find me on Twitter at the Vincent Short. You can find Trevor on Twitter at the Alistair McCallis. Without any further ado, we're going to stop this plug break and get right back into the interview. One thing I found really interesting about what you guys have been saying about this new album you have out, Pteradactyl, is that it's not your most like childlike yet, because it's not the most like spontaneous. I always want to say spontaneous. That's not the word. Spontaneous.
Spontaneous sounds way nicer.
Yeah, it does. It's not your most spontaneous album. It's not your most like childlike album in nature. But for me, it was your most like whimsical album and your most like fairy tale like. Because I don't know, it just felt so naturalistic and so Italian. It felt like I was going on like a journey. Do you have any observations of why that could be possibly like that?
I think that, well, we hadn't seen each other since we made this record, but so we haven't even really got to reflect on this, the two of us, that much particularly. But for me, there was just a kind of weird sort of feeling that things were going to change maybe, and things were... I know it's like a terrible time for so many people, very luckily for me, it felt like a kind of strangely beautiful, like the weather was nice, it was quite beautiful, like I didn't have to do any work for a little bit. It was quite good, and I don't know, yeah, it just seemed like there was a kind of like a longing that I was feeling that comes across in the record.
Yeah, I think ultimately it's however it feels, it's supposed to... I get, like Nick said, a lot of people, certainly a lot of our friends, I'm sure it's the same with you guys, not everybody's had a good time through this struggle, and it felt meaningful to have something to show for this time that wasn't that was positive.
Yeah, I think there's like one lyric on there that's like, "Let the lasso go slack, it comes back," or something, which is just like, I just wrote it, but sort of the more I listen to it, like it kind of feels like just kind of letting things... It's like we're just pulling so tight all the time, trying to make stuff happen and get through stuff and do things. It's like, just let it go slack, and it's all going to be okay.
Yeah.
So on Bandcamp, you tag your albums as hauntology and hypnagogic pop. So like you already talked about like the yearning for like past, or like the ideas of like trying not to reveal too much about music. Do you feel like would you classify as that like your main genre? Or would you classify yourself more as like a lo-fi artist, or?
I guess, yeah. I mean, we're definitely a lo-fi artist, and I don't. I like the term. I really like hauntology as an idea. Like I really like Mark Fisher's writing, and who's kind of applied that term to music recently. I don't know that we necessarily sound like other hypnagogic pop bands or hauntological bands, but I think that idea of sort of redundant media and the kind of recurrence of the past, and kind of creating music that it's not really of the present. It's kind of it's almost on an alternate timeline, and by burying things under that layer of tape and crackle, it doesn't it could be coming from any time, and it feels like a slightly we're creating an alternate world every time we make music. So we relate to it philosophically, I guess, in that sense. But probably, we sound like a lo-fi band, I guess.
You guys tour, correct?
We've never...
Not as Oro Swimming Hour, no.
We've never really... We've both toured in various projects, but we do kind of one-off shows, but I don't know, they're not like normal shows. They're just like kind of... I don't want to say happenings, but they kind of are. They're just... we don't really play, we wouldn't play somewhere because they have a good sound system or it's a perfect venue for a music show. We tend to just choose spaces that we feel we can translate what it is we're trying to do better. And we've just found that not using any kind of PA systems or like, any kind of amplification, we just kind of stand in front of, usually it's like 20, 30 people, if that, in a small corridor. We've played in a laundrette, we've played in a house, someone's house, and we've played in,
a boathouse.
We played in a scout hut. And I think those environments are interesting because they're not set up especially for a music performance. There's no lighting or sound guy or whatever, and it makes the whole thing so much more relaxing to do. There's a lot of stresses that come with, doing big full-scale production shows, which we're both, have plenty of experience with. And it's just so chill. We just turn up with our guitars and we go, yeah, we'll play just stood there. And in fact, actually, we played a show in London and there was a stage and we said, we don't want to play on the stage. We found this beautiful little sort of like cubby and that was like built into the side of the wall. It was like how would you describe it, Nick? It was
just like a little alcove.
Yeah, like a tiny little alcove, and we decided to just play in there because it's just more kind of personal. It's weird also having that kind of divide between a performer and like an audience when you want to make a connection. And I get that, when 15,000 people want to go and see Nickelback, they can't play in someone's front yard. Whereas for us, it just kind of suits it.
I really like that your live shows reflect the kind of music and the idea behind the music that you're making. I think that's really cool.
I mean...
They're like very intimate shows, it sounds like. Yeah,
I think Oro Swimming Hour is just... We want to just have an absence of stress. Just like no stressing. Just totally chill. And we kind of apply that to... As like, if it was our philosophy or whatever, we actually apply that to pretty much every single aspect of being in a band. We just no stressing, just make it chill, and then your own personal attachment to it is only positive and joyous.
Very good. A big question that I completely forgot to ask earlier: how did you two meet?
MySpace.
Yeah,
we usually lie.
Yeah, we actually normally when we do interviews we lie and make everything up because it's, I don't know, we don't really take ourselves particularly seriously as people, but the reality is we just met on MySpace. I think I found Nick's music. God, I wouldn't even know how long ago that was now, but I found his music and we were starting what we thought was a really rad record label, and really all we were doing was just like pressing up the odd, CDs. We did like runs of like thousands of CDs, thinking that man, you just press up 1,000 CDs and then they sell and that's it. But they're definitely.
And how many of those 1,000 do you still have?
Oh, I could build furniture out of it. There's enough to build furniture. But yeah, and I ended up booking Nick for a show, and he came down to my little village. I don't know what you must have thought when you got there, but yeah, it was probably one stage above the sort of shows we do now.
Yeah. It was like a sports bar in Marlborough. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, it was love at first sight, and we just knew that we were gonna do something together at some point. It just happened to be all kinds of circumstances that led to Oro Swimming Hour being birthed.
I think the when we really knew we're like, okay, like we're friends, like this is a thing. Like I think you invited us to play in Bristol, and we'd booked a venue, and the venue pulled out on us, and so we were like, me and my band were in Bristol with all our equipment, and we were like, well, I'm not going home, like, let's play a show. And Ollie, I think you went into some venue called was it the Arts House or something, and we're just like,
yeah,
our venue's cancelled, can we play here now? And they said yes, and we did. And then we were like being too loud upstairs, so they moved us downstairs, and there was like a Spanish class going on down there.
Yeah.
And we and the Spanish class like just finished, and then we played to the Spanish class, like, because they were like the people who were there. And it was awesome. It was a really good show.
And I think confused.
And I think it was like, great, well, so we had to play a show. We did. The Spanish class really had a great time. I think and I think after that we were like, okay, like, this is fun, like,
yeah. And that's all you need. That's all you need. You just need a place, and you can play anywhere. And that's kind of what we do.
I like that philosophy a lot. That's very good. What does Oro Swimming Hour mean? The name.
Well, so when we were thinking about making a project and doing some music together, we were getting lots of Nick was sending me lots of kind of visual stuff rather than music, and you sent me all kinds of pictures, and we came across this tribe. I think they're called the Arioi tribe. Is that true? Is it the Arioi tribe?
Something like that. Yeah, we should probably know more about it, co-opting some of their stuff. But there is a Polynesian god called Oro, and I think there's like a kind of statue or thing representing it, which is really cool. If you look it up, it's just a kind of beautiful wooden thing with eyes. It's great. So that's Oro, but Oro means gold as well in Spanish, and it kind of it worked in lots of ways for us. And then we gave him his own swimming hour at the pool.
Yes.
So
I know it's like a super cliche, but there's something another kind of thing about Oro Swimming Hour is, it's like, certainly when it comes to writing lyrics and coming up with song names and coming up with our band name, this never really meant to have much meaning behind it. It's kind of abstract and surreal in such a way that it's actually almost it's not impossible to derive meaning from it, but it doesn't necessarily need to have it for it to be special, I think. And Oro Swimming Hour it's just nice to say. Like, we make up words and all kinds of stuff to make our lyrics fit sometimes, and I think we just had the same approach to come out with a band name. Like,
I see.
Yeah, it's just kind of funny.
Everything, like, to me has an image associated with it, and kind of, or a color, and it's not like it's meaningless. But I really like the Cocteau Twins, who kind of made up their own language and words, and it's you have to like be intuitive with feeling instead of sort of trying to craft a story. I mean, and you guys said you felt like you kind of went on a story with the album, which makes me really happy to hear. But it's not always the words that are directly telling you what that story is, I think.
Right, I feel like I got more out of the actual music behind it than I did the words, personally. This is going to sound like a very strange question, so just bear with me.
If you say that, you have to make it really strange now. You've got to ask a really strange question now.
I think it's just weird for me, I guess, because I'm an American looking outward from my, I say worldview, but I'm using air quotes. How do you feel like British culture or like your British upbringing plays into your music?
Oh, that's not a strange question. That's all good. A strange question is like, if you weigh 160 gigabyte iPod and then fill it with 160 gigabytes of music and then weigh it again, does it weigh more? That, you know what I mean?
Can you answer that?
Think about that, or ask someone that when you see someone acid and see what happens. Yo, dude, have you ever weighed an iPod?
I think it depends what genre you put on, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But it's also the emotional attachment you have to the music.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't really... So I know that I am obviously English and I was born in England, but I don't really have much of an attachment to English culture as such. I kind of, we live in a connected world now, and it's easy to not necessarily experience in person, but to, look at and listen to and see all the art from around the world. And I think like my like musical and art and even film upbringing wasn't really British or English. So I think when no one's really heard of us in England. Like there's a couple of people in Bristol that like us, but it seems to be like you guys over the pond seem to be way more into it. So I don't know, maybe it'd be interesting to know your take on that. Do you think our music's more aligned with American culture or British culture?
I'm just going off of like what you have told us, and obviously I heard like your little Wild West village kind of thing going on, and I heard you talking about whatever those shows were, the Wild Roundabout or something.
The Magic Roundabout.
Is that? Yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah.
That to me feels like very British, as well as the song Jim Jam Jum.
That's true.
That
true.
feels extremely English to me. And I can't place it. That's how it feels.
Well, you call jam jelly, and we call jelly jam.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I can see how that is, and I know that like British people are supposed to be super into like scones and jam, so I can see that definitely. And you're kind of right. Like, if we had to talk about like shows that we were influenced by or whatever, things like Mr. Ben are quite British. So that makes more sense.
Yeah, I think I see in Ollie's music that kind of there's like the British childhood, and Ollie grew up in he did grow up in a pretty interesting village. I think some of the stories from there are quite psychedelic, like guys who can vomit on demand in the pub, and I don't know. Yeah. Ollie would tell them better.
I grew up on a council estate where everyone's kind of on welfare and all that kind of stuff. But I was very lucky in that when I grew up, there were so many interesting characters, and not necessarily happy, but even some of the sort of darker people. That I don't want to like go into too much detail, but people of all walks of life. And it definitely like gave me a better perspective on humanity, because nothing can prepare you for when you open your doors to the wider world and just see it for what it is. It's actually nice when you met some people that have been through all the different experiences that you can as a person, and that was so. I guess in that sense, I've always tried to capture that. People look at things that may disgust them, but other people see it. There's still quite a lot of love and positivity and joy in it all. So I've always tried to capture that, and I think that's quite a British thing. Like, like the classic identity crisis thing. It's like, who am I? And working that out is much easier when you're surrounded by people that are very interesting and strange.
That sounds very lucky. I'm glad that you had those experiences. I think they play into your music very well.
So that's it for the interview. Without any further ado, we're going to give you a song off their new album, Pteradactyl. It's called Cold Tangerina. We're going to play it right now. Is there anything you guys want to say about the song before we play it?
Keep hydrated.
Keep hydrated, yep.
Well, it was good. Here's Cold Tangerina on the Anthony and Todd Show.
Cold Tangerina. In the rain at the store, you can feel it, but that's in the man if you trust. Cold Tangerina. metaphor of what you do. I could do a multi-pack if that was true. Caught in the game of an orange juice contest. If it's the same light coming through, I see it playing off. There's the peel of the common fruit I rest. And if you say you want it to, you know I'm staying on. Cold tangerina, take Clementina. In the rain at the store, you can feel it, but that's the rain of your chest.
This is episode 3 of the Anthony and Todd Show, interview with Oro Swimming Hour. The Oro Swimming Hour consists of Oliver Wilde and Nicholas Stevenson. Their new album, Pteradactyl, is up on Bandcamp and streaming services like Apple Music and Spotify. I definitely recommend you checking it out. It's a really good, fun, whimsical project. If you want to find them on Twitter, you can find them at Oro Swimming Hour. If you want to find them on Instagram, also Oro Swimming Hour. This week's episode was edited by Vincent Thomas Short and was executive produced by Dustin Cox. You can find The Anthony and Todd Show on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Anthony and Todd. You can find us at youtube.com/The Anthony and Todd Show. You can find us on Podbean, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Play Podcasts, and Spotify. Search The Anthony and Todd Show in your favorite podcast browser. You can support us monetarily at patreon.com/The Anthony and Todd Show. And you can find me on Twitter at The Vincent Short. You can find Trevor on Twitter at Alistair McAllis. If you want to see my weekly internet radio show, you can go to twitch.tv/Vincent Thomas Short. That is it for this episode. For Trevor Abley, I'm Vincent Thomas Short. Until next time, guys, see you, boyos.